MoviePass a grand invention, or was it the greatest scam in history? In 2011, Stacy Spikes and Hamay Watt created MoviePass to get people back into the theaters. Stacy Spikes created Urban World Film Festival, which is a rival to Sundance, and hoped that people would go back to the theaters despite Netflix taking over. Netflix had already made its presence known and allowed people for a small subscription to have access to a large amount of TV shows and movies. What could convince people to get back into the theaters? Well, it had to come with a good price tag. And they decided that they wanted to work with these theaters to come up with a discounted price to get people to come back if they were willing. AMC was interested at the beginning, but once their CEO switched over, they decided that they were no longer going to work with them and figure out their own pass. Was MoviePass dead on arrival? Almost. They came up with another way to get people access to the movie theaters with the MasterCard MoviePass. They decided to create an app and invented an app that could use location to prove to the app that they were there, and then money would be transferred to this debit card so that they could pay for this ticket. Now, at the origin of this app, the price was a lot higher and you saw a lot less movies, but it was a business model that could work in the long run. But after 5 years and only 20,000 subscriptions, Chris Kelly, their main investor, said, "You need a new strategy," and we're bringing in Mitch Lowe, who at the time was associated with Netflix, and was told, all right, what are we gonna do? Ted Fernston was brought in by Mitch Lowe, and together they told him, come up with a business deal that would get the most consumers, even if it doesn't make any sense. So they came up with the $99 a month, and you could watch any movie, any day, at any theater. So people started subscribing because it was a deal that they just could not miss. And the amount of subscribers went to 1.5 million in 6 months. Now, how could you possibly sustain $9.99 a month when one movie ticket cost $11.50? And the answer was you can't, because they weren't making any money off of these subscriptions. And what they kept trying to sell was this idea that they were going to make money by selling the data off the app, and that once they had 5 million subscribers, they could start selling it. And now it was very interesting that they were never able to reach 5 million subscribers, but they did have money from Hudson Bay Investment Group. Hudson Bay was also a company that Ted worked very closely with, and they were able to funnel a lot of money to MoviePass. And they started spending money at insane levels. They spent $1 million at a party for Coachella. They bought helicopters. They worked with grand celebrities, and they started to just pour money into this. But they were not getting the results that they wanted, and the consumer was paying the price. There was many people who would go as much as possible with the MoviePass, and when the deal was you pay $10 and you can watch as many movies as you want, people were going to go and do that. And now if you had over 1 million people choosing to use the product the way that it was marketed to them, you start to lose a lot of money, because the money had to come from somewhere. And if it wasn't coming from the subscription to the service, it was going to come from outside investors. And Ted was very savvy at getting people to give them money without any real understanding of where this money was going to be repaid. So Stacy and Hamay were pushed out of the company, even though they had started MoviePass. And MoviePass started to lose a lot of money. When Stacy was COO, they were losing $200,000 a month. And when Ted and Mitch took over, they were losing $30 million a month. Now, how can you just blow through this much money and not have any understanding of where the company was going? Well, it's because they didn't have any hopes of this company going anywhere. So that was the goal in the long run, was to just take as much money as possible and let the company be dissolved. So as time elapsed and they needed to make money somewhere, they started cutting features on the app. They did not allow people to go watch any movie they wanted. They gave them certain access to certain movies on certain days. They had restrictions and more restrictions, and eventually the app wasn't working at all. So Mitch and Ted basically burned this company to the ground with their decision making. And when Hamay and Stacy were pushed out of the company, they were told that they could sell their shares in a year from now. And their shares were estimated at 80 million when they were pushed out. And if the business kept growing for a year, they could then cash out and sell their shares. But they had to hold on to them for that year. And within that year, Mitch and Ted destroyed the company, and it went from selling at $2,000 of stock to just pennies, meaning that Hamay and Stacy lost out on over $80 million. They had no value when they went to sell the stocks. So how did they do this, and why did no one see this coming? And towards the end of the MoviePass MovieCrash documentary, we start to show that Ted is a scam artist. There's different protein drinks and nutritional supplements that he was interested in, and that he was just trying to make as much money as possible, as quickly as possible, and that he really wasn't considering the consequences of it. And there was consequences to be paid for spending millions of dollars and hurting the consumer. Because they were telling their engineers to limit the app's ability without telling the consumer that it was going to be changed, there was fraud allegations brought against Ted and Mitch that as of May 2024, they're still awaiting trial. And if fully sentenced, they could serve up to 20 years. Now, what can we learn from somebody making these types of decisions? And unfortunately, this is not the first time that something like this has happened, and it is not the last. If you have seen other documentaries we've talked about, there is this get rich quick association with a lot of the ways these companies are run, especially the ones that are run into the ground. The successful companies understand that there is a process and a foundation that needs to be built, and it needs to be created with the understanding that all of us are going to get there eventually if we put in the work and are creating the habits to get us there. But that is not what Mitch and Ted were interested in doing. They were interested in selling a dream to just about anyone willing to listen, and the way they planned on making money was by selling data. They wanted to sell the data that the app was getting based off of their location and money that was being connected. Now, if you know of Facebook's Cambridge Alliance scandal, that is exactly what Facebook did and got a very large lawsuit brought against them, and was the reason why they changed from Facebook to Meta, and was a huge issue that many people were angry about. But why were Mitch and Ted able to go on live TV and say, well, we're gonna make money by selling data? I think a lot of people understood that they were never gonna get to that point, because they said we need to reach 5 million subscribers, and once we do, we can sell all the data and make all of our money back. So when somebody is offering you an idea, an opportunity, an investment, you have to consider it from multiple perspectives. And of course, Stacy and Hamay had decisions to be made prior to adjust their marketing and their business before other investors were brought in, and they did have 5 years to do so. For 5 years, it took them to realize how to get 20,000 subscribers. They were not changing their approach often enough or quickly enough, or learning from their mistakes quickly enough for people to adapt and be seeing the impact of what they were creating. So their investor was saying, all right, well, if you can't figure it out, I have to bring someone else. And that really goes back to this idea of, if we keep doing the same thing over and over again, we're going to keep getting the same results. And this is not a new idea. This is something as old as time. They didn't change how they were developing, how they were doing things, so somebody else was going to. If you aren't willing to make the decision, somebody else will come in and make it for you, and they'll probably do a worse job. And that is what happened to Stacy and Hamay. They were pushed out of their own company, and they lost a lot of money because of it. So you have to understand that your own decisions have consequences, and you don't have to keep making those same decisions. You can choose to stop making them once you see the impact of them, but you won't see the impact unless you take a look at what the outcome of these decisions are. And though there is a subscription to Netflix or Amazon, you're actually subscribing to everything that you're doing in life. You are subscribing to the type of haircut that you have, to the type of food that you eat, to the type of people you hang around with. You are constantly subscribing to a reality that you may or may not actually like. And you get to take your time, your attention, your money away from any of these sources if you so choose to do so. And you are always subscribed to something. And your identity is connected to that thing that you are giving all of your resources to. You may not think that you have a lot to offer to someone, but you have your time and your attention, and you do have money to whatever extent, and you are choosing to offer it to certain places, and you can choose to stop subscribing at any point. You can choose to make a different decision, and I want you to consider what it means to make the decisions that you're making. What life is it creating for you, and what don't you like about this life? What decisions and actions are you continuing to create to make this life possible that you don't like? If you don't like what you're subscribing to, stop subscribing. It's up to you to decide where your attention and your time goes to. Just like it was up to Stacy to make a profitable business with the resources he had. He had people who were dedicated and interested and wanted to see it succeed. They just didn't know how to do it. And there needs to be people who you are checking in with who actually have ideas that can help you. And that person at the foreground needs to be you. You need to be the person inputting new ideas into your life to make it better, because no one else is going to come in and do it for you. And if somebody else is coming in, if there is a job that is taking up all your time, if there is a relationship that is offering you all these suggestions, they're going to do it in a way that benefits them. Mitch and Ted did not care about the experience that people were going to have at the theaters. They cared about the money that they were going to make off of it. And that is usually how signing up for a job or being in a relationship that you don't really care for goes. You are signing up for their dreams. Somebody will end up using your time to benefit them if you are not using your time to benefit you. And that is the price that they had to pay. And for them, that price tag came with an $80 million deficit. Now, most of your decisions might not cost you $80 million, but it could be. If you think that you are capable of creating something that can change people's lives and you are choosing to spend it following and creating somebody else's dream, you are wasting your potential to create that high level impact that you want to. And you have to figure out as to why you're doing things. Stacy and Hamay had good intentions, and that's great, but without the storyboard to follow it, without the follow through, their impact could not be as big as it was supposed to. So you need to understand why it is you're doing what you're doing. Why were they doing this? They wanted to get people into the theaters, but their marketing wasn't focusing on getting people into the theaters. What do people want? How do you reach people? That was what they were missing. And people are always looking for something that is going to benefit them. And that was not what they were creating. So when you are trying to create a life and a business and you are trying to move forward or you're trying to attract someone, you are always doing sales. You are always trying to sell somebody a story of yourself. And no one sells any product by saying, yeah, the car sometimes starts and it doesn't come with wheels and it doesn't actually have a steering wheel, but it's a car. Nobody is selling that story to them. And what they knew at the front was you need to sell them a story that they're gonna buy. And they did. They were able to get 3 million subscribers. They were not, however, able to keep those subscribers around because they were not interested in providing them value. And that is what you are doing all the time. You have to realize what value you are bringing to the table, to the relationship, to the anything that you are doing. What value are you bringing, and what value are you getting out of it? If you think that you are always offering an interesting conversation and being funny, and you are the fun one to be around, and you have all these cool ideas, and you're offering that to people who are only making you upset because of the stories they tell you, you're annoyed when they call because all they do is complain, you feel like you're wasting your time because you're just helping them with their problems and they never want to listen to you when it's your turn, what value you're giving is not the value you're getting out. And that is not sustainable. At some point, one of you is going to walk away because you aren't going to be able to provide as much as that person was getting out of you. You're not as funny or as interesting because you're just tired of them. Or you're going to get super tired and just cut them out because you're like, I don't want this anymore. But you have to be constantly doing this analysis in your own life. If somebody is messaging you or in your life that is not providing any type of value, and value doesn't mean that they are giving you money, value could be that you enjoy being around them, that you have fun, that you laugh, that you can share. That is all value that someone provides. And if they're not providing that, why are they there? And that is the question that you have to get to, is why are people in your life that are not being a place of value for you? You can spend your time anywhere with anyone. Why is the person that you are giving your time to hurting you by not being a person who you can depend on or trust, or even offer your best version or your worst version of yourself to them? Someone does not want to be there for you at any point for any reason other than what you provide for them. You don't need them in your life. And that goes for everything. If you are at a job where you are not excited to be there, it annoys you, the people are mean, or they aren't listening to you, you are not going to be getting the best version of yourself out of this. And we are constantly being forced into situations we do and we don't want. And most of the times it's the ones we don't. We have to pay rent. We have to, pay the utilities. We have to pay our taxes. We have to do certain things. You don't have to be around that person that you grew up with. You don't have to be at that job. You don't have to follow everyone else's path just because they told you this was the only one. You can choose to go in a different direction because it is your life. And if they're not adding value, you don't need them. And just as Stacy and Hame were not able to add the value at the level they were supposed to, they lost their business to somebody who couldn't care less. And that is what you're doing. You're letting somebody who actually doesn't care about you win over you with your time and your attention. That person will call whoever is willing to answer. It doesn't have to be you. And if that person eventually does exit your life and you're upset and you're like, but I was the person they depended on, understand that that person was going to get the most out of the minimal amount of input. They don't care about you, just as Ted and Mitch did not care about the vision. If you don't care about your life, why do you think anybody else is going to? At the end of the day, MoviePass could have been a grand thing, but it wasn't because of how people decided to run it. And it doesn't start with Ted and Mitch, it starts with Hame and Stacy and the investor. They were all doing what they could with what they had, and they decided to hand it off to somebody else instead of really digging down and trying to change it themselves. And that is not an easy way out. It was not easy for them to lose $80 million, but they did because they could not figure out why their own product wasn't working. So why is your own product not working? Why are you unable to keep people around or to attract the right people in your life? And why are you letting the people who you don't want in your life stay there? Why are they still in your life? It's better to be alone and on your own figuring out who you are than to be around people who you don't like yourself when you're around them. And that is where they finally came to. MoviePass went bankrupt in 2020, and Ted and Mitch are under investigation. Because MoviePass went bankrupt, it was put up for auction, and Stacy reached out and bought the company. It is his rising from the ashes story, trying to reclaim and rebuild, and he is trying to do so after a pandemic where theaters are still not being filled at the levels that they should, but almost every theater has their own version of a MoviePass. How is he going to compete? Is this the Phoenix story that he should be going after? That is a decision only he can make, and one that he will see profitable, if it is one that is going to do so. The market will decide if this is something that is viable. From what I've seen, it is something that might not be taking hold as quickly as he'd like, but hopefully he's learned the lessons of trying to change it. And if you want to have a Phoenix rising from the ashes story, you have to understand that in order for you to rise from ashes, you have to burn down the life that you understood and was the one that you found comfort in. You can't rise from something if you don't completely tear down the thing before. And tearing down the life that you knew is going to be difficult, because you're going to have to not just release people that were in your life, but the versions of yourself that allow those people to be there. And that is the most difficult thing that you're going to grieve in this process, is the person that you once were. But understand that that person has to fall away in order for this new version of yourself to rise. If you want to be a person who can handle the market saying we like this or we don't, you have to be able to let go of the people who were providing this validation for you. And you might be thinking, well, all these people just suck that I'm around all the time. There's a reason why you're staying there. They could be providing a certain level of acceptance or validation, or just enough attention to keep you on the hook. And you have to realize that their validation, their likes, their yays don't actually matter, because they're not going to be there when the going gets tough, when you actually need the person to stand up for you and to say, hey, I'm here for you and I want to learn from you and I want to hear from you. Those people will not be there. So burn your life down anyway and decide what you're going to do. And that is a more metaphorical burn your life down. You don't have to cut off every person you've ever known, cut your hair off, change where you live. You could simply just say, you know what, today I'm going to choose to drink the water instead of the Coke, or I'm going to go for a walk instead of watch as much TV. And that watch as much TV could be, I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk and watch 50 minutes of the show instead of an hour. It doesn't have to be drastic, but it does have to be consistent. Whatever you do needs to be something that you are consistently going back to and becoming a better version of because of. His Phoenix story will not blossom unless he has learned the lessons of what happened and not get to a point where other people are making decisions for his life. That is the grandest lesson of MoviePass, is when somebody else starts to make decisions for you, they are going to manipulate and use all of your tactics against you, and eventually you will be pushed out of the board of your own life. And you are always in control, and you always have the ability to take back control. And it might be more difficult at times than not, but it is up to you to decide how difficult it's going to be and how much power you're going to continue to give away. You've subscribed to this life for as long as you have, but you can choose to subscribe to a new one. And you need to evaluate why you have chosen these decisions for as long as you have. What validation is it bringing to you? What version of acceptance has it brought into your life? And if it's not bringing you the life that you want, you need to reevaluate why you are doing this. There is self-reflection that needs to happen, and then there's just plain choices that need to be made. Choices need to be made, and then they need to be evaluated for their abilities to actually do what they are supposed to do. If reading a book every single day is not sustainable, then you can't do it. But you won't know that until you try. And there are some ridiculous examples that we can come up with, but then there's other examples that may not seem so ridiculous until you put them into action. You might think creating a video every day is super possible, and you might come to the conclusion that it's not, but you might also come to the conclusion that, oh, it is super possible. I just have to cut out the 3 hours a day that I'm spending talking to people who don't actually provide value to me, because they just use me to talk about their problems. So what's going to get cut? Is it going to be your dreams, or is it going to be the person who's keeping you from them? I hope MoviePass can turn into something grand. I actually have the AMC A-Listers Pass, which is $25 a month for 12 movies. I think it's a pretty good deal, but you have to actually watch at least 2 movies a month in order for it to be valuable. Is there always 2 movies that I want to watch every month? Not necessarily. But let me know, have you subscribed to MoviePass in the past? Have you watched the documentary? Is there anything that you're doing right now to subscribe to the life that you want? can subscribe to this channel, you can subscribe to anything, but what I want you to subscribe to is the life that you've always wanted. Make the decisions today, tomorrow, and every day after to create the life that you want. And if you make a decision you don't like, guess what? You don't have to do it again. And you're the only person who can learn that this was a decision you no longer want to make. So, become the person you want by letting go of everything and everyone that doesn't add to your life. Unsubscribe to them and subscribe to the person you want to be. I'll see you soon.